The rain on Vega 9 always fell sideways. It mixed with the neon lights and turned the streets into glowing rivers. Captain Rian Vale stood under the cover of a rusted roof, watching ships land and rise in the busy spaceport. His last job had ended badly, and now his fuel tanks were almost dry. He had just enough credits for one more week of food, maybe less. Work was hard to find for a man with a broken record. Most employers didn't hire captains with smuggling suspicion. Stamped in their files, Rian was thinking about selling his ship when a shadow appeared beside him. It was tall, thin, and moved with a strange flowing grace. The figure wore a long coat, the hood pulled low, hiding most of its face. But Rian could see pale silver skin under the hood, definitely not human. The voice that came was soft, almost a whisper. "Captain Vale, I have a job for you." Rian's first thought was to refuse. Jobs that began in dark corners usually ended with blaster fire. But then the figure spoke again. 20,000 credits. Half now, half on arrival. That number made Rian's heart jump. It was too much for a simple transport job, and in his world, too much usually meant too dangerous. "What's the cargo?" Rian asked. "2 passengers," the figure replied. "They are twins, young, harmless. They must be taken to the Orion colony," Rian frowned. "Harmless passengers don't cost 20,000, he said. The figure tilted its head. And for a moment, Rian thought he saw a smile. "Consider it. Payment for your silence." Rian didn't like mysteries, but his ship, the Wayfarer, needed fuel and repairs, and 20,000 credits could keep him flying for months. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll take the job." The figure led him to a private docking bay. Inside, 2 young aliens stood waiting. They looked no older than 12 in human years. One was a girl with deep blue eyes and hair the color of starlight. The other was a boy, silent, with dark green eyes that seemed to study everything. They wore plain travel clothes, no bags, no visible weapons. "This is Lyra," the figure said, pointing to the girl. "And this is Soren," pointing to the boy. "They will cause you no trouble, Captain Vale, unless you give them reason to." The twins said nothing. They simply looked at Rian with the same calm, unblinking stare. It made him feel like he was the one being examined. Rian led them aboard the Wayfarer. They followed without question. Their footsteps made no sound on the metal floor. When they passed the engine room, Soren glanced at the control panels for only a second. But Rian noticed every switch had flickered, just for a moment. That night, after liftoff, Rian set the ship on autopilot and went to his quarters. The twins stayed in the passenger cabin, sitting side by side without speaking. It was strange. Most passengers asked questions, looked out the windows, wanted to see the stars. These two just waited. Hours passed, and Rian couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the way Soren had looked at the ship's controls. And about the smile, if it was a smile on the silver-skinned figure's face. Around midnight, he heard something. It was a whisper, faint but clear. It wasn't coming from the intercom or the ship's systems. It was coming from the walls themselves. The voice spoke in a language he didn't know. It sounded like flowing water mixed with a deep hum. Rian followed the sound down the corridor. It led him to the cargo bay. The lights inside were off. He opened the door slowly, and the sound stopped in the darkness. 2 shapes stood in the center of the room. The twins, they were facing each other, hands almost touching. Their eyes glowed. Faintly in the dark, Lyra's blue, Soren's green. For a moment, Rian froze. He wasn't sure if he had walked into something private or something dangerous. The twins turned to look at him. Neither spoke, but he felt something, a pressure in his head. Like a thought trying to push its way inside, he stepped back, his hand moving to the blaster at his side. Soren's gaze held his for a second longer. Then, without a word, the twins turned away and walked past him. They went back to the passenger cabin and closed the door. Rian stood alone in the dark cargo bay. The whispering didn't return. But he knew one thing for certain. This was no ordinary escort job. And if the twins had a secret, he had just stepped into the middle of it. Strange passengers. The next morning, the ship drifted through the quiet lanes of deep space. Outside the windows, the stars burned cold and distant. Inside, the silence was heavy. The twins sat together at the passenger table, eating the same slow breakfast without speaking a word. It was not the quiet of strangers. It was the quiet of people who didn't need words. Rian Vale poured himself a cup of bitter ship's coffee. He sat across from them, hoping to break the ice. "So," he said, "first time traveling this far out?" The girl, Lyra, didn't look up. Instead, she slowly pushed her cup toward the center of the table. The boy, Soren, reached over without glancing and poured more water into it. They moved as if they'd practiced this all their lives, like two hands of the same person. Rian tried again. "What do you plan to do on Orion Colony?" This time Lyra raised her head, her blue eyes locked on his. "Plans change," she said simply. Soren gave the smallest nod, as if that was all the answer needed. Then they went back to eating. When breakfast ended, Rian went to the cockpit. He checked their route and the radar clear skies. No ships in range, but when he glanced at the navigation logs, something strange caught his eye. The ship's star maps had been updated. Not just adjusted, updated, with coordinates for systems no human database had ever listed. He knew for a fact his navigation computer couldn't invent that kind of data. He checked the security feed. Sometime in the early hours, the twins had been in the cockpit. They moved quietly, touching no controls. Yet the maps shifted on the screen as they stood there. Their eyes glowed faintly again, blue and green light, mixing into a strange silver hue when they were close. Later that day, Rian found Lyra in the observation deck. She sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing in a small notebook. When he leaned closer, he saw it wasn't a drawing of anything human. It was a map: spirals, broken circles, lines that bent in ways space wasn't supposed to bend. "What is that?" he asked without looking up. She said, "The way home." That night, Rian couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not by cameras, but by something moving just outside the edge of human senses. When he walked past the twins' cabin, he heard Soren's voice for the first time. It was soft but clear. "Don't answer it," he was saying. Then silence. Rian stopped. He knocked once. The door slid open, and Soren stood there, calm as ever. "Don't answer what?" Rian asked. "The signal," Soren replied. "What signal?" "It will come," Soren said, and closed the door. Rian stood in the dim corridor. He didn't know whether to feel annoyed, worried, or both. Whatever these twins were hiding, he was starting to think it wasn't just their business. It was going to be his problem too. The first attack 2 days into the journey. The stars outside the Wayfarer seemed sharper than usual, almost too sharp. Rian Vale was in the cockpit when the radar gave a soft, steady beep. One contact, small, following at the exact same speed. He tapped the scanner. No ID, no signal, no transponder. Whoever was behind them didn't want to be known. He set the ship to a slow drift, just to see what would happen. The contact slowed too. He pushed the throttle up. The contact matched him perfectly. That was no coincidence. Rian opened the comm channel. "This is Captain Vale of the Wayfarer. Identify yourself," he said. Static. He tried again, louder this time, still static. Then, without warning, the ship behind them flashed a short pulse of white light. A coded signal, old military style, but the code made no sense to him. The cockpit door slid open. Soren walked in without knocking. "Don't answer it," he said. "That's the signal you were talking about." Rian asked. "Yes," Soren said, his voice steady. "If you reply, they'll lock onto us. And if I don't reply?" Rian asked. "They'll still try," Soren said, "but they won't know where to aim." Before Rian could respond, the radar beeped again, this time a warning tone. The ship behind them had powered weapons. A thin beam of light shot past the Wayfarer, close enough to make the hull shudder. Lyra appeared in the doorway now. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were brighter than before. "They are testing you," she said. "They want to see if you run." Rian didn't like being tested. He threw the ship into a hard turn, diving toward the edge of a nearby asteroid belt. Chunks of rock the size of houses drifted in lazy orbits, but at this speed, hitting one would tear the wayfarer apart. Behind them, the pursuer followed. Weaving between the spinning stones, another beam of light flashed past. This time it hit an asteroid, splitting it into glowing shards that tumbled away. They're not trying to miss anymore. Rian muttered. Soren leaned closer to the controls. Take us through the gap at heading 190, he said. That's suicide, Rian replied. It's safety, Soren said. For us. Rian didn't know why he listened. But he turned the ship. The gap was narrow, too narrow. But just before they reached it, Lyra's hands touched the side wall of the cockpit. Every light in the ship flickered. The wayfarer jerked sideways in a way the engines shouldn't allow. They slipped through the gap with less than a meter to spare. The pursuing ship tried to follow. It didn't make it. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt like a second sun. Shards of burning metal drifted slowly. Rian stared at the twins. You want to tell me what just happened? He asked. Lyra only smiled faintly. We survived, she said. That's all that matters. For now, Rian wasn't so sure. He had the growing feeling that this was only the beginning. Hidden truths. The asteroid belt was far behind them now. Space was quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that hides danger. Captain Rian Vale sat in the cockpit, watching the endless black. The twins were in their cabin, silent as ever. Yet he couldn't shake the image of Lyra's glowing eyes, and the way the ship had moved as if it were alive. That night, curiosity finally pushed him too far. He opened the ship's log files. Every ship kept a record of energy flow engine output, power spikes, emergency systems. On the time mark of their escape, there was a reading that made no sense. The ship had drawn power from a system that didn't exist. A source zero entry. The log didn't even have the proper symbols for it. Just a row of broken code. Before he could think on it more, a faint hum drifted through the walls. It was the same strange sound he had heard the first night. The sound like running water and deep vibration. He followed it down the corridor. It led into the twins' cabin. The door was slightly open. Inside, Lyra and Soren sat on the floor facing each other. Between them floated a small sphere of light, spinning slowly. It wasn't a hologram. Its light touched the walls, bending shadows in impossible ways. Rian stepped inside. The sphere reacted instantly, collapsing into a tiny point and vanishing. The twins looked at him with no surprise. You shouldn't see this, Soren said. Too late, Rian replied. What was that thing? Lyra spoke now, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. A map, she said, but not of places you know. Rian crossed his arms. I'm not blind. I've seen you change my navigation charts. I've seen this ship move in ways no engine can, and that little stunt in the asteroid belt. What are you two really doing here? The twins exchanged a look. It wasn't just a glance, it was like they were speaking without words. Finally, Soren said, We are not going to Orion to meet family. We are going there to hide something. Something that does not belong to the hunters. Hunters. Rian repeated, The ones who attacked us? Yes, Lyra said. And others worse than them. If they get what we have, there will be no safe place left in human space. Rian felt a cold weight settle in his chest. You could have told me this before I agreed to take the job. He said. We could have, Soren replied. But you might have said no. And you are the only one who can take us there without being found. Why me? Rian asked. The twins didn't answer, not right away. Then Lyra said something that made his skin prickle. Because your mind is not fixed, you make choices no one can predict, even us. Before Rian could press for more, the ship's radar beeped 3 short pulses. Incoming contacts, multiple. The hunters had found them again. Lyra stood up. Her eyes brighter now. It begins sooner than we hoped, she said. Soren added quietly, Now you must decide how far you're willing to go. The hunters' close in the 3 blips on the radar grew fast. Too fast. Captain Rian Vale pushed the Wayfarer to full burn. The engines roared. But the distance closed anyway. Whoever these hunters were, they had faster ships. They'll reach US in 8 minutes, Rian said, checking the nav screen. Soren stood beside him, studying the radar as if reading a book. They are not here to capture us, he said. They are here to erase us. That's comforting, Rian muttered. He angled the ship toward a thin scattering of dust rings, ahead remnants of a shattered moon. It wasn't much cover, but it was better than open space. Lyra entered the cockpit, holding a small black case. Inside was a device no bigger than Rian's hand, covered in symbols that shifted when he looked at them. "What's that?" he asked. "The reason they're chasing us," Lyra said. "And the reason you're still alive." The Wayfarer jolted as the first enemy ship fired. A burst of energy grazed the starboard wing. Warning lights flashed across the console. Shields. "At 60%, Rian called out. "We can't take more than 3 hits." Soren leaned closer to the controls. "If we can reach the dust rings, I can hide us." "You can hide us from ships that are right behind us?" Rian asked. "Yes," Soren said simply, "if you trust me." Another hit shook the ship. Lyra placed the black case on the console and pressed her hand against it. The strange symbols rippled under her fingers like water. Outside, the space around the Wayfarer seemed to bend. The stars themselves shifted, warped, as if the ship wasn't where it had been a moment ago. Rian glanced at the radar. The enemy ships flickered on the screen. They were still coming, but their movements grew erratic. "They can't lock on," Soren said. "Not while this field is active." Rian risked a look out the window, through the distortion. The hunters' ships darted back and forth, like predators sniffing for prey they couldn't see. "How long can you keep this up?" he asked. "Not long," Lyra admitted. "And when it ends, they will be angry." The Wayfarer slipped into the dust rings. Chunks of shattered rock floated in slow orbits, catching pale starlight. It was quiet for a moment, too quiet. Then a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the deck. The hunters were scanning. Soren's face tightened. "They're using pulse sweeps," he said. "When they find us, there will be no time to run." Rian's hands tightened on the controls. "You two better tell me what's in that case right now." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. "It is a key," she said. "One that can open something buried long before humans learned to travel the stars." "And why would the hunters want it?" Rian asked. "Because," Soren said, "if they turn it, it will close everything, forever." Before Rian could ask what that meant, the radar lit up red. The hunters had found them. The dust rings exploded into chaos as enemy fire tore through the floating debris. Rian threw the ship into a hard spin. "This is going to be rough," he warned. Lyra closed the black case and held it tight. "Rough is better than gone," she said. Asterisk the choice. The Wayfarer shook under the force of another hit. Metal groaned. Warning lights flashed red across the cockpit. Rian Vale's hands gripped the controls until his knuckles turned white. They were one hit away from losing shields completely. Soren's voice was calm. "We can't outrun them. We have to jump." "Jump where?" Rian snapped. "Anywhere but here." "Not anywhere," Soren said. "One place." He pointed to a set of coordinates already glowing on the nav screen. They weren't in the ship's database, just like the maps the twins had changed before. Rian glanced at the numbers. "This location doesn't exist," he said. Lyra stepped forward, her black case clutched in both hands. "It exists," she said. "But it's hidden. It's where the key belongs." Another blast rattled the ship. Shields at 20%. A few more hits and the Wayfarer would be scrap metal floating in the dark. "Why should I trust you?" Rian demanded. "You've lied to me since Vega 9. You didn't tell me what you were carrying. You didn't tell me who was chasing you. And now you want me to take you to some ghost coordinates." Soren met his eyes. "Because the hunters will kill you even if you give us up. They can't risk you talking. And because you don't want to be the man who refused to save a galaxy when he had the chance." That last part hit harder than colder than Rian expected. It wasn't flattery, it was a challenge. He'd been called a lot of things in his life. Smuggler, thief, liar, but never coward. And he wasn't going to start now. The ship took another hit. Sparks burst from a panel behind him. Rian didn't have time to think anymore. He locked the coordinates and punched the jump drive. The Wayfarer roared as space folded around them. The stars stretched into silver lines. The hunters vanished. From the radar, for the moment, they were safe. But in the cockpit, the air felt heavier. Rian looked at the twins. "All right," he said. "You got me this far. But when we reach this place, you're telling me everything." Lyra gave the smallest nod. "You'll see for yourself," she said. "But when you do, there's no turning back." Rian didn't answer. The truth was, he'd already made his choice. And for the first time since taking this job, it wasn't about the money anymore. The final run, the Wayfarer burst out of hyperspace into a place that shouldn't exist. There was no star, no planets, only a massive dark shape floating in the void. It was not a station, not a ship. It was something older, carved from black stone that swallowed the starlight. Rian Vale felt a shiver crawl down his spine. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra's voice was almost a whisper. "The first gate," before Rian could speak. The radar screamed. Dozens of hunter ships dropped out of hyperspace, forming a tightening circle. "They tracked us," Rian said. Soren shook his head. "They didn't track us, they waited for us." The hunters moved in fast, weapons glowing. Lyra opened the black case and placed it on the console. The shifting symbols blazed with silver light. The cockpit filled with a deep vibration. "As if the ship's hull was humming an answer, Rian," Soren said. "The ship is part of the key." Rian blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You," Soren said. "Your choices, your instincts, they were needed to unlock the gate. We couldn't open it ourselves." The gate began to turn. Massive stone sections shifting with impossible smoothness. From its center, a bright white light spilled into the dark. The hunter ships broke formation, some pulling back, others rushing forward to stop them. Rian's hands flew over the controls, weaving the Wayfarer through incoming fire. "We can't fight them all," he shouted. "You don't need to fight," Lyra said. "Just get us to the center." The gate's light flared brighter. It wasn't just light, it was a corridor, a tunnel made of pure energy. Soren touched the console, and the ship responded like it was alive. Panels lit up with alien symbols. The engines roared hotter than they ever had. Hunter ships swarmed, but the gate's light pulled at them, twisting space around their hulls. Some vanished into the glow, others spun out of control. Rian pushed the Wayfarer into the heart of the light. The ship shook violently, alarms screaming. He thought they would be torn apart, but then there was silence. Outside the window was no longer space. It was a vast ocean of stars he didn't recognize, a galaxy untouched by any human chart. The twins stood side by side, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. "It's safe here," Lyra said. "For now." Rian looked at them. "You still haven't told me what's on the other side of that gate." Soren's faint smile was the only answer. "You'll find out, Captain Vale. After all, we still need you." And somewhere behind them, far beyond the gate, the hunters were still coming.